Howdy guys, Election Insight here with another video, and today I'm here to talk to you about the governor elections that are coming up in 2022. As we know, the 2022 election is only 10 months away, so I think it is fair enough to talk about the governor elections, considering that these governors are in, the last quarter or less of their term, with the exception of Vermont and New Hampshire. They're still in the last half of their term. So yeah, as you can see here, this is the incumbent party, and definitely with 2022 expected to be a change election, possibly a Republican wave. I think you're going to see a lot of changes. So as we look here, I'm just going to use all the characterizations to characterize races, but yeah, start with the incumbent party. I think the one that is most likely to change would be Kansas. Actually, I'm going to put this as a likely. Actually, no, it's not the most. This is the most likely to flip from Democrat to Republican. But Laura Kelly is the incumbent Democratic governor. She only won in 2018. One, because it was a Democratic wave, and two, because the Republican was a guy named Chris Kobach, who was not a very good candidate. And also, I believe the governor before Kobach was not the Republican governor. It was a guy named Jeff Coyler who he beat in the primary, and the governor before that was named Sam Brownback. And he was kind of notorious for defunding Kansas education. So that's why the Republicans lost Kansas in 2018, is because the mostly women in Kansas were really upset about that. So as for other likely flips, I have Massachusetts and Maryland going from R to D. In Massachusetts, the incumbent moderate Republican Charlie Baker has decided to retire, so therefore the election is going to flip from R to D. Massachusetts, a very liberal state, home of the Kennedys and all that, and yeah, there's no real chance another Republican can emerge. Same with Maryland, very blue state. The incumbent Republican there, named Larry Hogan's term limited. There is some speculation he might run for the U.S. Senate, but I don't think that's going to happen. But even if that did happen, he would not win that Senate seat, and the coattails would not be enough to make that race too competitive. But to be safe, I listed those races as likely. Now, characterizing other races. Just starting with the safe column, I'm going to keep California in the safe column for Democrats. I'm going to keep Hawaii safe. And I'm going to keep Illinois and New York safe. Those are the only races I'm keeping safe. Now, for the likely blue seats that I think are going to stay blue, Oregon. This state always tends to have very interesting governor races. I think Kate Brown is term limited, so she's not running, but Republicans always seem to put up moderate candidates who do pretty well. Colorado. This is a trending blue state, but with the Republican wave, it will become closer, but definitely not close enough. Connecticut, this is a state, again, has had a history of, actually, I think Ned Lamont there is a popular, let's look it up, Lamont approval rating. It's the governor of Connecticut. Ned Lamont as governor of Connecticut is a popular governor, but historically Connecticut has had some very competitive governor races, so that's not a safe seat. Same with Rhode Island right next to it. Blue state for federal purposes, but historically they've had some very competitive governor races. And yeah, so I'm not going to characterize that as safe. And the last one I'm going to characterize as likely is actually the state of Maine. Janet Mills, I'm not sure how, I don't think she's very popular, but Maine tends to be a blue state. This could shift, but right now I'm going to give the incumbent the advantage and keep this as a likely D state. Now going on to lean D states, I only see one lean D state on this map. That's the state of Minnesota. Tim Walz, the governor there, has been seeming to hold water even with all the stuff that's been going on with Minnesota. You know, George Floyd, Dante Wright, all the street rioting. He's been seeming to hold water there, which is impressive. But yeah, I I think Tim Walz will make it out alive and win by a couple of points, although this will be a close race. Now, for tilt Democratic seats, how many do I see? Do I see any of these as tilt D? I don't characterize. You know what, for now I'm going to characterize New Mexico as tilt D, although the Republican there is a guy named Mark Ronchetti. He ran a good campaign last time. He came only within a few points and way outperformed Donald Trump, even with barely any money running for a senator against a popular Democrat. So yeah, I think he's going to get more money this time. The national environment is going to be against Democrats. It's going to be close. He may even win, and I may even shift this prediction in later episodes. But, you know, as of right now, I'm going to have to give the incumbent, Michelle Lujan Grisham, a slight advantage, although I suspect this to shift throughout. So I think the last four are going to be flips. Wisconsin is the most likely to flip for me out of these four blue states that I got to talk about. So Tony Evers there, he's a very unpopular governor. The Republicans seem to be headed for a good year there, and Tony Evers there is the Democrats probably not going to survive. As for a tilt seat, Gretchen Whitmer, her popularity seems a little weird. She's doing a bunch of draconian things on COVID, but somehow the polls still show she's popular. But I think the candidate there is the Republican there, James Craig, former Detroit police chief, will actually do pretty well, and we'll be able to get some inner city vote, plus we'll play well in the rural areas. Republicans will be able to win that seat. Pennsylvania, it's going to be, I think the nominee is going to be former Congressman Lou Barletta, but this is going to be a hard primary for the GOP, but once they get out with a candidate, I think they'll do okay. The Democrat there is the state attorney general named Josh Shapiro. He ran a competitive race in 2020, won by a couple points, but he had a no-name opponent and he barely won. So that tells me once he gets some money against him, he will not be able to make it out of that race alive. Now going on to the last D to R flip, we're going to go with Nevada. Nevada, the Senate race seems like it could go or will go Republican. I think the governor race is going to be close as well. There's a primary between Joe Lombardo and former Senator Dean Heller. It looks like Joe Lombardo's headed for a victory there. I know the base is behind Lombardo, while the establishment is behind Heller, and we've seen how establishment versus base battles go in Republican primaries. So yeah, I think Joe Lombardo is going to make it out of that primary, and then end up beating the Democratic governor Steve Sisolak. All of that could change. Now, the last couple of states we got to talk about that are going to be competitive are these Republican-held states. The Democrats are going to be on offense then. First, let's talk about Iowa and Ohio. Iowa and Ohio are interesting. Mike DeWine there's kind of a weak governor, but I'm not sure if he has a primary challenge, but I think he's popular enough and Ohio is red enough to keep him in office pretty convincingly. In Iowa, Kim Reynolds has been a decently popular governor from what I understand, and she's going to be fine. Although, with Iowa having been a historically close state, it's still not going to be a safe margin. And, yeah. And the last likely red state is going to be Texas. The Democrats, I did a long video on this, by the way. The Democrats are running Beto O'Rourke. He has lost pretty much all popularity in Texas when he talked about guns and how he's going to take everybody's guns away. So yeah, even with Greg Abbott's shortcomings or possibly the primary challengers, although I don't think the primary challenge is going to come to pass, I don't think Abbott's going down. But yeah, even with Abbott's shortcomings, I think Beto O'Rourke's deep unpopularity in Texas is going to keep him out of the governor's mansion and give Abbott 4 more years, whether you like it or not. And let's do some lean R states. I see Florida and I see Arizona as lean R states. Arizona is an interesting matchup. It looks like it's going to be Carrie Lake as a Republican, who's a former news anchor. Very charismatic, very likable, but she's been floating some out there ideas about the election. I think one of her quotes is, "You can say Biden is president," kind of like you can say OJ is innocent. And you could do with that quote what you want, but she doesn't believe that Biden won the presidential election. So she's saying that. Katie Hobbs is the Democratic Secretary of State of Arizona, but the problem with her is she doesn't seem very likable, and also with the national environment 2022 going against Democrats, I don't think Katie Hobbs is going to be able to do that well, and I think Carrie Lake is going to end up winning the state by a couple of points. Now on to Florida. Ron DeSantis, whether you like him or not, I think he's popular enough in Florida to do well. He's going to win by a couple of points, maybe more. He may win by 5 or 6, which would put it as a likely margin. But Ron DeSantis has enough approval rating. Florida is starting to grow some Republican DNA. Florida likes to swing with the national environment just a little bit. So with all those factors and the fact that the Democratic candidate just went out and compared DeSantis to Hitler, which, is obviously such a, far out there statement to make that she's not going to be taken seriously, I don't think the Democrats are headed for a good result in Florida. And the final state that will be characterized as something other than safe, Georgia. The head of the place where all of the election controversy happens. Georgia, we had 2 runoffs there. We had the Trump phone call to Raffensperger. We had one of the closest margins I've ever seen in a presidential election in the state of Georgia. I mean, we had it all in Georgia in 2020 and 2021. And I think we're going to have it even more. Biden just did a voting rights speech in Atlanta. But interestingly enough, the Democratic candidate for governor, and also the person who has advocated the most for voting rights, although they're not really voting rights at all because it's obviously not racist to show your ID card and things like that. But the person who's advocated for new voting laws the most is Stacey Abrams, and she did not show up at that event. But it's going to be her versus Brian Kemp or former Senator David Perdue, depending on who gets out of that hard primary. I think it's going to be Perdue, although it's clearly a coin flip. So, yeah, you're going to have, let's just say, Perdue versus Abrams. It's going to be close. It's probably going to be the most expensive governor's race, although maybe like a Pennsylvania or a Michigan could overtake it, or possibly even a California just because of how expensive LA and San Francisco media markets are. But Georgia's going to be very expensive, and both sides are going to be going at each other as hard as they can. But I tend to think the Republicans will barely win the Georgia governor's race, and we'll have a governor's map that is 31 Republicans, 19 Democrats, and yeah. And before I go, I just want to talk about a couple things for safe seats. You're probably shocked to see Vermont as a safe red seat unless you know about the governor, but he is a very liberal Republican who has like a 70% approval rating. He won with about 70% of the vote in 2020, and I don't see him losing. New Hampshire, Chris Sununu is very popular. He won. His vote total was in the mid 60s, in 2020, and I don't think Chris Sununu is going to have any problems. So yeah, those two may seem interesting to you. I didn't talk about them, but that's why the governors are very popular there. They're not losing. So with all that being said, have a great day, guys.